Hi, this is Susan Farron with First Responders Resiliency. You can see more about our work at resiliency1st.org. And today I want to take a little bit of time to introduce you to our program, who we are and what we do. First Responders Resiliency was designed in 2017 after I had been a paramedic for just over 30 years. I was initially diagnosed with terminal kidney cancer. When they did surgery on me to remove half the kidney and the tumor, they discovered that I was not terminal. It turns out that I did not have a mass on my liver, which is what they initially thought I had. But one of the surgeons made a comment after my surgery. He just said, "We see a lot of this in first responders." Now, I knew that we had issues in our industry. I had been doing the job long enough in both the private and public sector, working with the fire departments and the ambulance companies. And I was aware of the problems that we all knew about, the substance abuse, the high divorce rate, the depression rate. I'd actually had 4 of my colleagues take their own lives, but somehow I guess I thought that there was something else going on in their worlds that was contributing to this. But after that comment was made, I began doing the research into what was killing first responders. Because when he made that comment about organ cancer, it really hit me. And I started researching organ cancer in first responders. And as I discovered that there was a huge issue with first responders being diagnosed and dying of organ cancer, especially kidney cancer, which is where the adrenal glands rest, and where when we're constantly in this state of fight or flight, that's coming out of the adrenal glands and that's resting on the kidneys. Huge issues with that, but also heart attacks and strokes. There were issues with depression, isolation, substance abuse, suicide, divorce rates, the whole thing. I mean, everything that we were aware of. What I knew from being in the industry was that we had really 3 or 4 ways of dealing with this. We had the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, where no disrespect intended, but oftentimes you'd end up with a therapist who had no knowledge of what you did for a living, maybe was a new therapist because they were working for EAP. And it's hard. It's hard to share with someone who has no idea what you do for a living. The second thing was CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management, where I was not only I was a peer counselor, I was a coordinator for the CISM debriefings, and I know that we would get together, we would rip off the scab of an event that just happened to us 2 or 3 days earlier. There would be a therapist sitting in the room, and we would be sent home with, don't drink too much, try to exercise, and be kind to yourself. Don't, go home, good luck. And the truth is, I saw my own colleagues and oftentimes the people that I supervised still struggling after these debriefings. The other thing that we have is peer counseling, and this is a great thing. I'm not against any of these things. I want to be clear about it. I'm not against CISM, I'm not against EAP, but peer counseling. This is where one first responder talks to another first responder, and one of the first responders has a couple of days of training. This is coordinated through the International Association of Firefighters. It's a great concept, but here's what I discovered when I began doing the research. The first thing I discovered was that there were changes taking place to the limbic system in the human brain to people who were repeatedly exposed to trauma and stress. And so your hippocampus, your hypothalamus, your amygdala, we're all being altered by what we do for a living. That kind of a change happens as a result of what we're exposed to. And many of us grew up in environments where there was dysfunction, there was addiction, there was illness. And so a lot of us were kind of born into these jobs. But more importantly, one of the things I was doing the research on, the neurological impacts, was the mirror neurons. And that is when one person is talking to another person, they will unconsciously imitate behavior, and they will also remember things when someone talks. So if you just use the example of, if I start telling another first responder about a call that I ran on looking for peer support, peer counseling, and I start the call with a detail, let's just say that I start talking about a car crash that I was on, and I use specific details about the age of the victims or what was on the scene, whether it was a rollover. The minute I do that, another first responder hearing that, their mirror neurons are going to begin to fire, and they're going to remember calls that they ran just like that. And this is what we know with the work of Peter Levine, Dr. Peter Levine, through books and there's also, I can't think of his name, Bussell Vanderkirk, The Body Keeps the Score. These books show us that memories are not just stored in the brain, they're stored throughout the tissues. Somatic therapy talks about the fact that this is all stored in the human body. So I'm doing this research, I'm looking into the neuroanatomy, how it changes our psychology, how we begin to change the result of what's happening to our brains, what happens to our bodies, the physical impacts of what we do for a living. And here's an example that I used in a previous video. Emotions, the definition of an emotion is energy in motion. And so if we suppress our emotions, we suppress that energy, it stores in our tissues and our organs. And I read an article one time that said anytime there is irritation or inflammation in an area of the body, there's an invitation for cancer. Thus, the high incidence of organ cancer in first responders. There's so much more information about this. It wasn't just the neurology, the psychology, the physical impacts, but the emotional impacts, how we change. I could ask any of your family members and they'll tell me that you changed in the first couple of years after being on the job. So it changes our relationships as well. There's sleep deprivation, there's suicide awareness, and there's substance abuse. And all of these things had to be addressed ahead of the fact that we were coming down with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, which I discussed earlier, is not a disorder, it's an injury. A disorder is something like schizophrenia. An injury is something that can be prevented and treated, and post-traumatic stress can. So if you're struggling with these symptoms, it's not a disorder, you're not labeled with this forever. It's something that we have to work through and overcome. So with all of those subjects being addressed, this program came out of my awareness that there was something we could do to prevent some of what was happening to us. And I use this analogy. There's this thing that I just got sent about peer counseling, and it's about a firefighter being in a hole and being so depressed and isolated, and how, a therapist walks by and offers medication, another psychiatrist walks by and offers something else, and a civilian walks by and says, suck it up. And all of this comes down to the final story, which is, and another firefighter gets in the hole and says, I know the way out, let's get out together. How about we just don't have the hole? How about we start by filling the hole? And I use the example of building a fence. Instead of putting an ambulance down below a cliff to shorten the response time and get our patients somewhere fast, how about we build a fence? And that's what we do at First Responders Resiliency, is we introduce people to all of the information that's out there, the most current research that's out there about physiologically, how does this job impact you? And what can you do to limit those symptoms? So here's one of the last things I want to say about this. If we know that this is true, and it is, that stress is one of the #1 contributing factors to disease, then reducing stress is one of the #1 contributing factors we can use to reduce disease. The reason why this matters so much during this pandemic is because keeping our immune systems strong is done through learning how to work within your own physiology. And so over the next few weeks, you're going to see us posting videos about what can you do with the neurological changes that take place. I'll have Ron Scholl, who works with us, he's our director of operations, come in and do a presentation about that. We can talk about nutrition. Crystal Scholl, who's the director of our family training program, will be talking about that. We'll have other homeschooling videos on, because we've got people who are now having to homeschool their kids. We'll have information about emotions and relationships and how to work within these areas so that you can stay strong. Because right now, in this moment, we need our first responders to stay as healthy as they can. And everyone knows, as they are being the ones exposed, right? It's not just the patients they're transporting, the suspects that they're seeing who have symptoms. It's all the people they're seeing who do not have symptoms and are carriers. And so we're going to see this front line of first responders being affected by this COVID-19. And we want you to be able to do everything you can in your power to strengthen your immune system, stay healthy, so that if you do get the virus, maybe the duration will be less. If you can build your immune system, maybe you won't get the symptoms, but you'll be a carrier and you can just keep the symptoms at bay. But in the long term, what we want is to change the culture for first responders. It's no longer suck it up, power it through, read another book, take a promotion. It's about how do we take care of the inside? See, we've been given money and equipment our whole lives to put out fires, save patients, deal with suspects, emergency room physicians, nurses, dispatchers. They're all given all this equipment, but almost nothing for the most important piece of equipment that they'll ever need, which is the thing that's resting between your ears. We have to learn to work with our brains and our minds and our bodies to stay well. So we're gonna put these videos out. We're gonna introduce you to modalities that you can use. We can give you the information and the education. We are not doing this alone. We are a group of first responders. We are doctors and nurses and dispatchers and law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics. We're all instructors for this program. But we also work with Loma Linda University to collect the data on our program. We're working with UCLA to do sleep deprivation research, Dr. Gina Poe. So there is an entire group of us who are working together, trauma therapists, who are working with us to make sure that what we're doing is we're bringing you cutting edge information, giving you tools and modalities that you can use to stay well. You can also go onto our website and you can book us during this time to do conference calls so that we can call into your departments and help you work through some of these processes. Nothing I can do today will stop this virus in its tracks. But what I can do is I can work with the first responders and their family members to try to stay well. So we're going to ask that you stay safe, be kind to yourselves, your family, and humanity as a whole. And we will continue to put these videos out and encourage the first responders and their family members to stay well. Please, if you have an interest in supporting our work, go to resiliency1st.org, and we'll see you back here again real soon. Thank you.